Uh, Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning for all the people attending today's seminar. And this is the number 6 seminar for our series for this year. We are very honored to invite the founders for the One Word, One Book project. They are going to tell us about their project and then about the books they selected in honor of the AAPI Heritage Month in May. So I will let them start.
Hi, everyone. I'm June. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the One Book, One World project and who we are and why we are doing it. So the idea first came from a conversation between a group of parents. You've probably all heard of the Black Lives Matter movement. And every year in February, which is the African American History Month, schools will have projects surrounding Black history. So we were just thinking, how come we've never heard of the school doing such a thing about Asian American History Month? This is a question we should ask ourselves because for the most part, Asian American community has remained silent and we never really fought to have our history included in school curriculums. Illinois just recently passed a bill mandating Asian American history in schools. Despite some imperfection of the bill, this is a huge step for Asian American as a community. I don't know how many of you are familiar with AAPI Heritage Month before this year, but to be honest, I only learned about it after my conversation with the founder for this project, Jolie, who first told me about her idea of this book drive. So here's a little bit background information about the AAPI Heritage Month. AAPI stands for Asian American and Pacific Islander. It was originally APA Heritage Month or Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And then it was officially changed to AAPI in 2009. And why did they choose May? May was chosen to commemorate two things. The first Japanese immigrant arrived in the US on May 7, 1843. And the Transcontinental Railroad was completed on May 10th, 1869, where a majority of the workers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. This commemoration was first observed in 1979 as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week for the 7-day period starting from May 4th. And May was officially designated as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in 1992. If you want to learn more about AAPI Heritage Month, here are, you can go to their website. There are tons of information on this website. Just make sure don't get overwhelmed because there are really a lot of documents and events and all sorts of information that you can find. And then there's also the National Archives where you can find documents that display information about Asian Pacific Islander immigrants and their experiences in the US. I want to show a short clip from a talk that Erica Lee did about her book, The Making of Asian America. This book is included in our recommendation list.
Regrets the moment when I had one of those light bulb moments that authors often have. I was taking a college course in California history major, and we were going through the steady events of the California Gold Rush, the genocide of Native Americans, the migration of so many different peoples that came into California. But then we got to a topic that I had not known anything about, the anti-Chinese movement, the late 19th century. This is when Chinese immigrants were called chinks. They could never become American. They were thought to be cheap laborers who took away American jobs. They were considered to be threats to the American family, a danger to American civilization, somehow less than human. They were harassed, they were exploited, they were driven out of the American West. They were prevented from becoming naturalized citizens. They were massacred in some of the worst episodes of racial violence in our history, and then ultimately barred from coming to the United States. And I still remember the sense of total shock when I looked at images like this. And the thought that went through my mind was, I never knew that this happened. I never knew that this happened. And then I remember asking myself, why haven't I ever heard about this? I'm a history major. My own family is Chinese American. They never talked about this. I didn't learn about this in school. Where was this history? And why are Asian Americans so invisible? I learned that Asian Americans have often been literally written out of history. Take, for example, this great moment in 1869, when journalists and photographers gathered at Promontory Point, Utah, as railroad workers laid the last spike in the building of the Great Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. So Chinese railroad workers were 90% of the labor force that built this railroad going from west to east. But when it came time to commemorate this moment in history, and journalists and photographers were gathering all of the important people to record this moment for posterity, the Chinese immigrant laborers were literally pushed out of the photograph. So they've been literally written out of history. And although I didn't know it then, the search for the missing picture, right? Who's not in the picture, the hidden Asian American histories, really put me on the path to do what I do today, to become a writer, a historian, and a teacher. A lot has changed since that moment. There are now many historical societies, organizations, social media campaigns where you can digitally pin important sites and events in Asian American history, digital archives, online encyclopedias. So much work has been done. There's award-winning books, award-winning documentaries, films that have made the point that Asian Americans matter in American history, and that you can't teach American history without Asian Americans. Some other activism has taken place on a smaller scale. Famed photographer Corky Lee, who's based in New York City, decided that he was sick and tired of having Asian Americans written out of history. And so in 2014, he gathered the descendants of Chinese railroad workers, as many as he could find, to make that trek back to Promontory Point, Utah, and to take the picture that he thought should have been taken in 1869. So there's a lot that has changed. However, there's a lot that still hasn't changed. Despite this progress, most Americans still know very little about Asian Americans or their long history in the United States, why they've come, and how they've been absolutely central to some of the most dramatic transformations economically, politically, socially in our society. What they do know about Asian Americans might be based on this particular image of the model minority, the idea that Asian Americans have somehow made it in the United States, that they're on the rise, that they're economically successful, academically successful, that they need no help from social services, and that they are the model for other minorities. This image has become so ubiquitous that it's really obscured that more complicated history that we know about. And it's also offering an inaccurate and incomplete portrayal of contemporary Asian American communities and issues. And despite all of those books and historical societies and historical national monuments, this is what I get from my students every semester, almost every week. I never knew that this happened. It could be Japanese American incarceration, it could be exclusion, it could be the hate crimes that affected Sikh Americans after 9/11. They still don't know this. And it's not just my students at Minnesota. I could be talking to students at some of the most elite universities in the country, to school teachers from the South, to New York City museum docents. There's still an invisibility of Asian American history.
So this is just a short clip from her talk about her book. You can find this from the National Archive. I will include this list, this link. If anyone wants, I will put it in the chat. So just like Erica said in her talk, despite so many social groups having worked on promoting the importance of Asian American history, many Americans still don't know much about the AAPI community, about our contributions and aspirations, and our challenges and fears. And I think part of it is because they were not exposed to these things at a younger age. In my personal experience, schools that are considered to have a diverse community might do some decorations or activities to celebrate Asian culture around the Lunar New Year, but that's about it. They rarely talk about the history of Asian American and their experiences in America. Usually private schools do a better job at including diversity into their curriculum, but most public schools, due to limited resources, or other reasons, can rarely afford to have a dedicated program on cultural studies or make their library collection as diverse as we would like. And that's where One Book, One World comes in. We started the project because we wanted to support our schools by donating collections of books that showcase diverse Asian American cultures and books that promote empathy and love. In addition to the books that we're donating, we've also put together an extensive list of book recommendations and sample lesson plans for the schools to use. We hope by doing so, schools and teachers will be encouraged to promote these materials and maybe consider using some of them in their classroom. Children's books play a critical role in developing individual values concerning life and human reality. Books are mirrors where children see a reflection of their own life and they feel a sense of belonging. Books are also windows. It provides a reality where children learn to understand and appreciate others. If a child only reads books that reflect themselves, that will become their reality, and it will be so much harder for them to accept anything outside of that reality as they grow up. However, you also can't just give children a history book and say, hey, go read this, because they're not gonna be able to digest that. And that's where the magic of children's books come in. They are engaging, easy to read, and usually have characters that kids can relate to in some way. They weave some of the hard to discuss topics into interesting stories. And when kids are exposed to these topics at a younger age through these windows, it's easier to lead them into deeper conversations as they grow up. It's important to fill a shelf or library with both books that serve as windows and mirrors. And there are so much more that books can do. Books are stepping stones. They are quiet corners. They are flying carpets for children's imagination. We started the book drive in a rush because we wanted to make sure our first donation can be delivered by May. And as you can see on our timeline here, we didn't really have a lot of time to go over every single book from the AAPI category before we had to announce this fundraising event to the public. But we hope this drive can serve as a stepping stone to raise awareness of the importance of including diverse books in school libraries. Our project is not coming to an end after the AAPI Heritage Month. Instead, it's only the beginning. And in the future, One Book, One World will continue to work in different channels to support youth development and promote diversity learning, whether it's AAPI or other minority cultures. So who are we? Most of the volunteers we have now are essentially just the first group of parents who sign up to help communicate with their schools. And many of them are also just the first one to donate money for the book drive. We have architect, lawyer, public school teachers, full-time moms, and many others who work in different fields. We gathered together with a common goal, that is to make sure our kids grow up in an environment that is understanding, respectful, and full of kindness. We have received support from organizations in many different industries. Some of them were totally out of surprise, and and not there, and many of them are not from Asian American community. We are grateful for their support, but at the same time, we value all of the efforts our volunteers have put in. The things they're doing today will make a difference in the future. And I will pass on to one of our teacher volunteer, Mrs. Wang. She is on the book selection team, and she will talk about a couple books that we're donating and recommending to the schools.
I think we
We can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I didn't notice that. So, hello everybody. It's such a great honor to be here to introduce like how and why we selected those books. I'm one of the member in the book selection team. And the first web we kind of donated and selected 17 books. But we added some other diverse books in the later. And now I'm currently a public school teacher. Just as Xiaoying said, we had rarely hosted those activities, even though I'm in the public school. More like the Asia American teacher, they would host some activities to celebrate Asia American and Pacific Islander months, but definitely not as impactful as Black American months. So this is such a great opportunity to let those books into the school and let more a growing number of teachers has windows, has chances to use that. So today I prepared like 20 books to recommend it to everybody's here. Before I introduce the list, I would like to kind of let everyone think about it. Why would I select those books, and why would our as a team members, what would we trying to express through those books? So when we at the beginning, we started the selection, we divided the book into fiction and nonfiction. So in the fiction, give me 1 second. Let me see. I cannot move it. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, so this more like, can you guys see me? Because my desktop kind of getting weird right now.
I can see you.
Okay. So sorry for the things. I cannot see my PowerPoint right now. It's really weird. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's the 4 groups here, general, and we put the Chinese American books in the very large selections, and the rest is Japanese, Korean Americans, Thailand, Vietnamese Americans, Cambodia Americans, and India Americans. And the number 4 group will be others. I will explain more about general and others. So from my perspective, because we have multiple members trying to select those books for elementary level, for middle school level, and for high school level. So since I'm an elementary school teacher, I kind of keep thinking when I choose those books, what would I try to convey to my students? So here is where I am standing here. And what are those books related to me? So if those books kind of just a story, that's not really meaningful. That's just a story. When you read it, done, that's it. But we have different kind of purpose for those selections. So I think those books should be kind of convince first a group. I put it here like what is the relationship between me and my parents and my grandparents. So that's a topic for my students, no matter that's Asia, America, or the students from other cultural background. The second would be what my relationship with my peers. How would my classmates perceive towards me? And the third would be what's the relationship between me and the whole world and the social environment here. So that's kind of a basic and the foundation when I make a decision if I should put this book in the list or not. So let's get started. Okay, I said I prepared 20 books and this will be the first one. And this book was published last year. So that's a new book. The title of this book is Eyes That Kisses in the Corner. That's a lot of Chinese culture environment. The elements is here. We can see Monkey King, we can see lotus, we can see a lot of the warm tea, the dragon. The first time I read this book to my students is, oh my God, I just truly love the illustrations here. And one of my students, who is Philippine American girl, and she, after reading this book, she said, I just love this book because this book teaches me how to celebrate who I am. Because I think that's a meaning and that's the purpose, the ultimate purpose to let more students identify themselves and accept themselves. Because it, like the Asian eyes is a stereotype. That's definitely a stereotype. But when we talk about Asian eyes, what are we talking about? We're talking about self-acceptance. We're talking about the beauty standards, but we can definitely set up those beauty standards by myself. So those books, definitely on this book, my students just love this book. This is the number one, book's number one, Eyes in that Kisses in the Corner. I downloaded this book. I downloaded this picture. That's I love it. I love it. And I consider to let my students have those activities as well. When they read those books, the Asian eyes is kind of the compliment. That's not really like the stereotype anymore. They wanted to be part of it, and they set up their beauty standards through this book. So I really love to share these pictures with you guys here. The book number 2 is I Dream of Popo. I Dream of Popo. The author is from Taiwan. She immigrated to United States when she was 7 years old. I just said when the first time I played this read aloud video to my students, I burst into tears all of a sudden. I just cannot control because there's some, the text is pretty simple, but just something hit your heart really hard. This book is very colorful, very vibrant, but that's also convinced, like the author, she said she kind of getting more familiar with English while she loses her first language. So at the beginning, she feels like the Chinese would be more comfortable to speak. By the end, she can barely communicate with her Popo. And by the end of this book, and in her dream, she speaks Chinese and her Popo speaks English. So those kind of, those kind of plot makes every readers to kind of immerse in the environment where they can put their feelings in author's shoes to experience something. Number 3, this book called The Grandfather's Journey, which is a story about Japanese American. I put these books here because I quoted one sentence from this book. It says, the funny thing is the moment I am in one country, I am homesick for the other. So I don't think my students, they are age ranging from like 5 years old to 12 years old, but when they grown up and they look back, there is a special feeling for those kind of books. There is a lot of things happening during those years, but you have special feelings for both your background countries and the country where you're studying down. So this is a number 3 books, Grandfather's Journey. And by the way, this is also the books has been rewarded the Golden Caldecott medal. This book is called Joined Together. The author is a Vietnamese America. I love this book very much. I just cannot help to put a page here that's very impactful. One is from the grandson. She visited his grandfather in Vietnam, and they cannot talk. They eat different things. They share different hobbies, but when they started to draw, they find each other. So we see each other for the first time through the brush, through the pen. That's also a very good book. And number 5 is Grandpa Grumps. This book is very cute. It's very cute. This girl is a Chinese American, and her grandfather visited their family from China, and that's kind of a saying like the love can be expressed in different ways. At the beginning, the grandfather's grumpy all the time, no smiling. By the end, they had a 蛋炒饭 together. They cooked the 蛋炒饭 together. Through the food, they connected and they built the bond. So this number 5, Grandpa's Grumps. And the 3 books, 6, 7, and 8. The first number 6 is Bila Cook's Style. It's kind of the talk about the food from South Asia. Number 7, The Name Jar. That's a story about Korean America. And number 8, Hush. That's a story about Thai American. So I put different books here because I want to, include more diverse culture books in our list. So this we also added like Indian, not really, Indian American books. Later I will introduce that, but those from the very, very diverse cultural background here. And the number 9, 10, and 11, those kind of a group of books, when we selected the list, that's not really specifically targeted at any race, any ethnic identities. The Invisible Boy, The Big Umbrella, and The Normal Pig. Nothing about race has been mentioned in the book. The Invisible Boy is a boy who's being ignored by everybody in the class, but he kind of getting more and more comfortable when he has a friend, and those friend can understand him. The Big Umbrella is more is kind of the book for at first and second grade. The text is very easy, and it illustrated like the umbrella can be bigger and bigger, no limitations there, and it could include more and more people. The Normal Pig is a story, teach you how to see your difference. It's also teach you how can you feel like when somebody cannot understand you, when you feel you're different, maybe because the people around you, they do not have opportunity to see the bigger world. So that's just 3 funny stories. Okay, the first 11 books are all a fictional book, are all fictional book. Starting from the book number 12, that's non-fictional. The first is Asian Americans who inspire us. The author is a Philippine American. She's a social worker in California. Even though she's born in the United States, but she says she's being discriminated all the time. So she wants to have this book to let the people know, to let more students know how great the Asian Americans can be. So this book as kind of included 16 Asian Americans who changed the world. So included Japanese American, Chinese American, Filipino, and the Thai, Korean, from almost from all the Asia culture background. And the book number 13 here, yeah, Ashima is 15 or 16 years old this year. She's very young, but she's a world-class mountain climber. That's a biography book. She born in the United States, and she still has very strong connection to Japan, and she loves the natural environment, and she loves the mountains. She climbed a lot of mountains around the world. And this book is kind of show you how Asian Americans can be, besides the stereotype saying you're a good grade students, you're a academically top students, but we can do something else. As an Asian American, you have more possibilities. Number 14, 15, 16. I intentionally put the 3 books here because those 3 books are biography books. The similarities is their biography books. Number 14, Paper Sun and the Queen of the Physics and the Fearless Flight of Hazel Ing Lee. The last one, The Fearless Flight of Hazel Ing Lee, this book was published this year, 2 to 3 weeks ago. That's very fresh. Those 3 Asian Americans, specifically Chinese Americans, they come to United States with different purpose. Paper Sun is a very controversial book. Paper Sun is a very controversial book. We had a conversation to talk if that's appropriate to put into here, but as we know, the Paper Sun is kind of the term refers to the Chinese people, not American people. That's a Chinese people who were born in China and they come to United States with fake document. That's not just targeted this book. That's a group of people. That's a specific history period. So during the Chinese Exclusion Act, in the video we just watched, that lady mentioned this period. Chinese Exclusion Act makes people from China has very limited opportunity to come to United States. And the characters in this book, he's coming with a fake document. However, he is one of the very, very celebrated Hollywood producer in the future. And Queen of the Physics, this is Wu Jianxiong. She's a pretty famous, very, very world-class famous scientist, a female scientist. She came to United States in 1936. That's kind of the period that people discussed the Chinese Exclusion Act as well. And the third, that's Hazel. She's born in the United States, but she is also the first female pilot during the Second World War. So they share the same Chinese culture background. However, they come to United States. They had the different achievements, career achievements at the beginning. that's different, but there's the achievement that they just very amazing in the later. Number 17 and number 18 are on two groups of books about the celebrations, like the holidays. Not just the Korean celebrations and the Chinese New Year, the thing that's also included the Thai, the full moon party celebrations and other kind of celebrations books. But these two books I put here because by the end of the book, they offered a lot of activities and handicraft or the recipes that's pretty funny to involve the kids to do it. And the number 19, this book called Adventures in Asia Art. There's two kids. They explored the museum in San Francisco, and within this book there is 15, I believe that's 15, let me see, 50, yes, 53 pieces of Asia art has been explored in this book. So through the eyes, through the lens of three cute girl kids, they find it a lot of interesting things about those arts. Not just the Chinese, not just the vase. There's a lot of like Tang San Cai, those kind of things. Number 20, I provided this book for my students, Asia Adventures A to Z, because very few students, they kind of have sense what Asia country in. They look at the map, they know Chinese are Asia, Japanese are Asia, maybe Philippines are Asia, Vietnam, but for the rest, they share very limited knowledge about it. So this book is from A to Z. They introduced a lot of Asia food and Asia architectures, the Asia cities through the letter A to letter Z. But there is one thing in this book I noticed, some like the political controversial things, like the letter L, that's Tibet, the Lhasa. So that's an independently city. I just want to bring attention a little bit about it. Otherwise, it's a very great book as well. So in this book selection PowerPoint, I included 20 books here, 12 fictional books and 8 non-fictional books. A lot of books other books you can find it in our recommendation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Let's pass on this too. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so do we have any questions for us?
I guess I can ask some questions. So since the project started, like have you guys connect with many schools to help them donate books to different schools?
You mean how many schools are we connected to now?
Yes, and then like which cities you have been reached? Maybe some people in the audience can help you guys.
Okay, so in Chicago, we are about around 70 schools were signed up by parents or teachers or or the school themselves, and so we were reached by other cities around the United States, including Minnesota, Rochester, and we don't have an exact count of schools from other cities, but there are about 6 to 7 different cities that are doing similar projects like us. Some of them carry the same name, and others are just because their school district is small, so they just did a quick book donation. But they're doing similar things, and they used our book list, or they considered our book list and maybe add a couple books to the book list. So we're really glad to see a lot of other cities that interested in doing similar things. And I think in the future, we want to make this a national, if we can do it like together in different cities, I think that'll be great. So if anyone, interested in participating in like a similar book drive, maybe next year, they can reach out to us. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. As a student volunteer, I was added to a student volunteer WeChat group. What are we supposed to do?
So we first had the idea of having students to volunteer for us, because at first when we started, like we said, we started kind of in a rush, and we didn't really have a lot of time to plan what exactly we're going to do outside of the book drive. And since we started with the book drive, we noticed that there are a lot more things we can do. Like, we could work with the schools and maybe have parents reach out to the schools, and maybe the parents and host some kind of like reading session at the school, where like high school students, maybe they can, if there are book clubs already, maybe we can work with them and just like continuously introduce more books into the school and actually have the school community use the books.
Can I ask a question as well? I'm kind of follow-up question. Then where do you donate book? How do you make connection with schools? How can you add a school on your list?
How do we add a school on our list?
Yeah.
So when we started, one other goal of our book drive was to encourage parents to Asian American or Chinese parents, because we started as in the Chinese community. We want to encourage parents to reach out to the schools and show them that Asian parents participate at school too. Like we care about the school community. We want to contribute to the school community. So that's part of our mission. So at first we asked parents to sign up their schools. And another reason we have the parents sign up their schools is also because when we first started, we don't know how much donation we're gonna get. So we want to make sure that we can donate books to the schools that have parents that involve in these things, and parents who can actually push the school to actually use these books. If we just come up with a list ourselves and then say, hey, like here's a bunch of books, do you want it? Most schools might say yes, and then but are they really going to use the books? We don't know. So after consideration, we decided to have parents involved more and have parents sign up their schools, and then have the parents work as a point of contact. So that's what we did for this book drive.
Okay, yeah, I work for the city of Minneapolis. I would like, if you allow teachers to sign up, I would love to jump on the board to sign my school up. Even though my school does not have a high population of Asian students, but it's very diverse. It's inner city school. I think that would be wonderful to educate other, about Asian. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So two things. We don't care if a school has a lot of Asian population. That's not the thing we consider if we want to donate to a school or not. We because we have limited funding, so our first priority is donate to any school that are willing to accept the donation, that actually like care about using these materials. And then second, answering to second part of your question is the One Book One World drive started in Chicago, And we were contacted by some other cities, some other groups from the cities that wanted to do similar things. But we are not managing their donation, or we're not managing their book drive. So every city are working independently, and some of them use a different method of donation. Some of them ask the parents or whoever wants to donate, buy the books on their own and then send it to them, and they will distribute the books distribute the books to the schools, but they don't actually do a fundraise like what we're doing. So I'm glad you wanted to do something. We can. I'll share my WeChat, and we can talk. I will add you to we have a group for different cities, and then we can talk more from there.
That'll be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I guess if there's no more questions, that will conclude today's seminar. Thank you for the speakers to give this wonderful talk, and we hope the project will grow more and more people will get awareness of the Asian American culture. And we will post the recording in our WeChat channel, and they will also post on their One Book One Word website.
Excuse me, can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Trying to raise my hand. I can't find the button. I'm for Washington State. We're just starting our initiative recently, in the recent couple of months, and it also started with Chinese parents in our community. But our goal was trying to involve a more diversified Asian community. So we're trying.
That's our goal too.
Yeah, that would be. If we want to, we all agree that we want to promote this to a larger scale. It's better to involve more diversified efforts. So would you have any recommendations on how we could approach this?
So for this May, for the AAPI Heritage Month, this May, we had very, very limited time. So, and we started from an idea, we didn't plan this a long time ago. So we had very limited time, and we had to work with what we have. So I think after this month, or this book drive, that's where our main where we're going to work on mainly is to connect with other Asian American groups, other like Korean or Japanese or Filipino or Vietnamese or Indian. We try to, that's what we're doing right now, but then because we're so focused on getting this book drive done, we haven't really get to it. We're reaching out to some groups, and then hopefully in the future we can do something collaborative. But that's our goal too. We don't want to limit this to Chinese American community, and that's why we're including a lot of books from other other countries too.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Okay, I think we can conclude this event. Thank you everyone for coming to the seminar.